Well, you've been having this argument in the West for basically a century. The same argument: capitalism versus communism, capitalism versus socialism, whatever. State ownership versus private ownership. Private ownership versus state control, and so forth. You're trapped in this binary, this sort of cage of thinking. And like I said, you're only ever told in the West that there are these two options. That there's only two possible ways to structure a society. There's only two possible ways to manage an economy. Well, no one insists upon a false binary, because binary is almost always false. No one insists upon a false binary unless you're just actually not interested in pursuing change. You're not actually interested in pursuing progress. And there's a reason for that. And the reason is obvious, because your problem is not actually your system. This is the truth. Your problem is the character, the culture, and the values that created the system in the first place. The priorities of your culture, the priorities of your value system. You understand? The system did not emerge out of nowhere. The system is an echo of yourselves, your own beliefs. You think that you can fix the system. You think you can make things better if you fix the system. No. I've said this many, many times. The system did not make your society the way it is. You made the system the way it is because you are the way you are. I mean, okay, sure, the system itself snowballs. It's self-fulfilling, it's self-reinforcing, it's a cycle, it creates a spiral. Because of the system, things get worse. But this isn't a chicken and the egg type of a question. We know the origin, because you built your own system. You built your own system, and you built it according to your pre-existing ways, the way you are. Yes, the problem was never capitalism itself, never in an absolute sense. It wasn't capitalism wasn't the problem. The problem is the character of the culture that practices it. That's all. The problem is the soul of the society, or the lack thereof. I mean, think about it. A culture that prioritizes hyper-individualism, where the highest possible good is basically personal enrichment. You're talking about a society that worships growth for growth's sake, consumption for consumption's sake. A culture whose moral imagination is so stunted that the only value that your culture recognizes is financial value. Honestly, the only metric of success is profit. Okay, in that kind of a cultural environment, of course your economic system is going to be predatory. Of course it's going to be a predatory monster, an extractive predatory monster. It's a reflection of the people who are operating it. It's a mirror of your own spiritual emptiness. This is why you lack any sort of imagination in this regard, in regards to other ways of doing things. Why for like I say, for a century, you've pretended that there are only two or maybe three conceivable approaches to the economy: capitalism, communism, socialism, what have you. You're literally not allowed to explore any other economic theories, any other economic approaches. You're not taught that there are, in fact, entire libraries of alternative models that exist, that have been tested by other civilizations across history, across human history. You're just given this narrow, sterile menu of A or B, and this reflects the narrow spectrum of your own character, of your own values, and your own priorities. Like I said, your own understanding of and your own approach to life itself, meaning itself. Like, I mean, in Islam, in Islamic history, for example, we have what would be a revolutionary concept for you. It's a revolutionary concept for you, but it's profoundly simple, and it's one of the best what you can call economic institutions in human history, and that's the Waqf. You haven't even heard of that. Something like this doesn't even occur to you. Like, you don't even have to cook this up in your own heads, the idea of the Waqf, because it literally, you can literally just see it in history, but that's how blind you are. And I'm not talking about imposed blindness here. I'm talking about the pre-existing blindness that caused you to build a whole system that reinforces blindness. A Waqf is a permanent, inalienable, charitable, revenue-earning engine for community services and projects, community needs. You understand? It's not a charity drive. It's not a one-off donation. A person takes a productive asset. So, like, a person takes a productive asset, say a farm or a bakery or a complex of shops, and they permanently dedicate it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to the community, to the ummah. The asset itself now can never be sold. Once it becomes a waqf, it can never be inherited. It's frozen. It's taken out of the speculative market forever. but it just keeps operating. It keeps operating as a business. It keeps operating as a farm or what have you, generating income. But that income, the profit, now goes into a fund supporting the community. Its revenue, its profit, now just flows forever into a designated social purpose to fund a school, to fund a hospital, to fund a library, what have you, to provide water for the city, to take care of the poor, to take care of the orphans, and so on. Because these are priorities for us. And this will go on for generations. It will go on for centuries. We have Waqfs in the Muslim world that have been operating for over 1,000 years. A piece of land, a building, a business, generating wealth, continuing to generate wealth that feeds the community in perpetuity. You understand? It's a machine that produces social good. It's capitalism, but without the conscience removed, which is what you have. It's private property, but whose ultimate beneficiary is the public.
Hello brothers and sisters, welcome back to the channel. I'm hoping that you're doing great from whatever you're watching me from. As you know, I'm your host and presenter Agent Stories. Now, there's a critical argument that Mr. Shade Bolson makes, and it really makes sense when you come think about it deeply, right? The system themselves are there purposefully to serve what they're meant to serve. But the problem is people are using it to their advantage, right? Because when you get to understand Shade Bolson's argument that political or economic system is not inherently evil, what corrupts it are the people who operate it. Because in theory, systems like democracy, systems like capitalism, constitutional law, and free markets could uplift societies if governed by more individuals. These systems were designed, at least on paper, to create fairness, to create accountability and opportunity. However, when morally bankrupt elites gain control of these systems, they twist them into mechanisms of exploitation rather than development. And this means that the system failure is not mechanical, but ethical. A lack of moral integrity at the top transform institutions meant for public good into tools of private enrichment. Brothers and sisters, I want us to watch this video. I'll be back and then I'll be sharing my thoughts in regards to this. If you're watching me for the first time, I'm your host and presenter Agent Stories. Make sure you subscribe, share, like, so that we can all have a great discussion in regards to this. So let's watch the video. I'll be back and then I'll be sharing my thoughts in regards to this.
I mean, think about it. Instead of insisting that profits should go only to the already rich and to shareholders, you could actually have profits going to support the community. That's an option. You understand me? That's an option. Like I said, you don't even have to imagine it. You don't have to try to come up with it in your head. This is something that we have already done, that we have already been doing, and that we still do. Because these are the kind of beliefs that we have. These are the values that we have. This is the culture that we have. And these are the priorities that we have as Muslims. This is a balanced approach between private individual profit and the well-being of the community. Well, tell me, why didn't you ever do something like this? Why didn't something like this ever occur to you? It's not because of your system. It's because of your values and because of your culture. You always talk, leftists and so on, always talk about so-called wealth distribution or redistribution. But come on. You are literally distributing wealth and redistributing wealth all the time. This is what you do. You have just chosen to continuously distribute wealth upwards and out of circulation. You understand? Your companies in America, in the West, are these huge vacuum machines that just pump money out of the society up into the stratosphere of the ultra-rich. It's absurd. It's truly absurd. There's no reason for this. Your companies are these huge machines just harvesting and siphoning up and sucking up money, sucking up wealth from the society nonstop. I mean, look at the S&P 500, okay? The corporate giants, the S&P 500, the market capitalization of the S&P 500 is approximately $40 trillion. Okay, the total revenue of the S&P, which is market cap divided by price to sales ratio, that's about 16 trillion. Now, if you drill that down to average net profit, that's the sheer profit. Okay, that's after expenses and so forth. you're looking at just under $2 trillion. Do you understand? The companies on the S&P 500 make a combined total of almost $2 trillion annually in net profit. That's $2 trillion. That $2 trillion has just vanished into the pockets of the wealthy. And once it vanishes into the pockets of the wealthy, we don't talk about it. Unless you're going to go with the eat the rich types and what have you. Then you'll talk about the money of the rich. That's your answer. Eat the rich, destroy everything. Control, Alt, delete the system and start all over. This is, again, the binary thinking. Well, what if you applied the Waqf principle instead? Just hypothetically. Just imagine if you could possibly bear for a moment not putting the greed of the rich before the need of the population as a priority. What if you took just 5% of the companies on the S&P 500, just 25 companies, 25 corporations, and you turn those 25 corporations into Waqfs? See, now you really get an idea. Now you really start to see how grotesque it is, how grotesque your system is. The system that your culture built. The grotesque system of a grotesque culture. Now you're going to see how appalling it is, okay? 25 companies, you turn them into Waqfs. Now their shares are frozen. They can no longer be bought, and they can no longer be sold again. They're removed, okay, from the casino of the stock market. They're removed. Now they're dedicated to the people, to the society, to the population, to the community. But they keep operating. They keep making their products. They keep providing their services and so forth. Obviously, they're still employing their people. They're not nationalized. We're not talking about nationalization. This is not the state seizing control of the company. You understand? They keep doing business. They keep making money. Nothing else has changed, except that the money is now being put into a fund for social needs. The profit, I'm saying, not the operating costs. You still have the operating costs are being paid for by the company itself. Again, this is not socialism. This is not communism. This is something entirely different. The net profit of these companies every single year now is going to flow into a central fund for community needs. And not for just 1 year, not for one, political term. No, in perpetuity. From now on, just think about the numbers. If you try to calculate the numbers, it's absolutely staggering. We're not talking about millions of dollars. We're not even talking about billions of dollars. We're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars. You understand? That's going into a community fund every single year. A perpetual, self-replenishing river of capital dedicated solely to the well-being of society. Imagine that. No government programs needed. Again, this is not communism. We're not talking about communism. This is not the state owning the means of production. This is the community, the people, reaping the benefit, reaping the profit of just a fraction of the companies on the S&P. Not even all of them. While those companies, yes, continue to work, continue to employ people, continue to produce and so on, continue to provide services. Everybody gets paid. Even your big executives, they can still make their ridiculous off-the-chart salaries. But the net profit goes to the people. What's wrong with that? This isn't about redistributing wealth, through taxation, through, bureaucracy. This is about pre-designating the wealth at its source, at the company. This is structural. It's built in. And it's elegant. The Waqf is an elegant system. This is a balanced approach, a balanced way. It's a way that honors both private enterprise and innovation while fundamentally rewiring its purpose for a good purpose. It's a way that uses the engine of capitalism, corporations, companies, but for the benefit of the population rather than to exploit and extract from the population. And again, we're not talking about every single company on the S&P. We're talking about just a few. Imagine the profits of a tech giant, for example, the profits of some tech giant funding now free tertiary education for an entire generation and for every generation thereafter. Or an energy company that will fund the so-called green transition by its own net profits. Or the profits from some healthcare company. What everyone agrees are these wicked healthcare companies. Now they're ensuring that no one goes bankrupt from a medical bill rather than bankrupting people. All of that money is available. It's literally available. It's right there in your country. It exists. This isn't a fantasy. The Waqf is not a fantasy. We've already done it. It's not a matter of possibility. It's a matter of will. It's a matter of changing your priorities from endless private accumulation to sustainable civilizational development. But that's not your culture. You understand? Now you see what the problem is. It's not your culture. This is not your values. This is not what you have ever believed in. The problem was never the machine. The problem was never the system. The problem was the operator. was the architect and the operator of the system. The problem was that you lack a higher purpose, a higher moral purpose, a civilized purpose. I mean, take a company like Apple, for example, okay? Make it a Waqf, Waqify it. Apple keeps operating, they keep producing, and they keep selling. They keep employing people. But it's $97 billion in annual profit. Now, instead of that just flowing to shareholders, speculating on a stock ticker, it flows into the fund. And that's just one company. Almost $100 billion that could be going into community services, community support, helping people. Or take Microsoft, same thing, $72 billion a year. Alphabet, the parent company for Google, $74 billion a year. But like I say, look at healthcare, Johnson & Johnson, United Health, the United Health Group. Their profits are like 35 billion, 22 billion, okay? Imagine if those could actually be dedicated to healing people and treating people, rather than just treating people as revenue streams. You know, the very companies that profit from sickness could actually become the permanent guardians of community health by by creating a fund from their net profits that would go into allowing people to be able to pay for health care. Again, with no government programs. No government programs are needed. Or you could take ExxonMobil, or you could take Chevron, on and on. You know, even consumer goods, Procter & Gamble, Coca-Cola, all of these companies that touch every household on earth. Okay, their massive profits could become a foundation for food security, for clean water, for the most basic of human needs. Do you see what I mean? Because the money is literally there. It exists. This is what I'm trying to tell you. But because your culture, your priorities, put maximum accumulation of wealth as the highest possible good, a higher good than community survival, a higher good than community well-being, because of that, that money is as good as non-existent. Take 25 companies like this. Take a cross-section of companies from the big players in the modern economy: tech, healthcare, finance, energy, consumer goods, and make them Waqfs. Okay, make them permanent resources for the people. There's literally no reason, no actual functional reason, practical reason why you couldn't do that, why you shouldn't do that. But you and I both know that it would never occur to you to do that, because the wealthy are sacred. Accumulation of wealth is sacred. You could literally be looking at over $660 billion every year, not a one-time stimulus, not a temporary program. Every year, a river of resources that literally never runs dry. And you still have your capitalism, you still have your companies, okay? You still have your jobs, you still have your products, you still have your private property and so on. All of these things that you hold sacred. Just be a little bit more balanced, that's all. Just a little bit more balanced. But this is when we see that actually it's not private property that you hold sacred. It's gross accumulation of resources and hoarding and monopolization of resources. This is what you hold sacred. The ability to actually put yourself in the stratosphere above all others. You believe in zero sum. I have to have everything and you have to have nothing, and it's my right to do that. And that right is absolutely sacred. This is where you're really coming from. Because there's really no, like as I say, there's no practical reason why you couldn't do this. The factory is going to stay. The workers keep their jobs. There's no real change in the system. The products, as I say, the products keep coming. But the fruit of that labor, the profit, the net profit, will nourish the whole community. You know, the tree remains, but its fruits are now for everyone. Anyone who's hungry. And again, we're not talking about this being mandatorily imposed or enforced as a uniform policy on all companies. No, it's like zakah in Islam. We have a percentage of our wealth that we have to give in charity. And in Islam, this is called zakah, which means to purify. By giving this charity, we purify our wealth by giving some of it in charity. That's how we purify it. So designating a selection of companies to become Waqfs is like that. It's a purification of capitalism by balancing it out and using some of the companies, just some of the companies, as perpetual sources of funding, as sources of endowment for the community. It's very simple. But look, I know that American dogmatic capitalists, their heads will explode at even think about such a thing. And like I say, they're so dogmatic that you already know what they're going to say to try to refute this idea. Never mind, again, it's not an idea. It's a real existing institution. It's an institution that the Muslims have had and have used and have proven for centuries. So we're not talking about an idea. It's not a theory. But you know what they'll say. You know what they say already, because these are not thinking people. They just recite from the capitalist catechism. So it's very easy to anticipate. They'll say, well, if you do that, no one's going to start a business. You've taken the incentive away, because the incentive for starting a business is personal profit, right? Okay, there you have it. That's the sickness of your culture. Those are the assumptions and the priorities of your culture. That's why you have the system that you have, because you think like this. It's not possible to have motivations besides the motivation of unrestricted accumulation of wealth. That's the only thing that you can possibly think about. What about private property, right? You're violating private property. Except that the value of your corporation isn't really owned, as in the profit that is created for your company is created by multiple factors, least of all by shareholders. It's created by your undervalued labor. It's created by your use of public infrastructure, by stakeholders, all of the stakeholders that actually make it possible for you to make money at all. If purchasing shares is a buy-in to the profits, then why isn't labor? Why isn't patronage? Why isn't your presence in the community? We're all affected by your existence. Like you exist here, in our city, in our state. You use our roads. You impact the valuation of our land, our rents, our cost of living, our quality of life. You use our resources, All of that contributes to you having a business, to you making money. Every business is a coalescence of factors, only a few of which are ever actually acknowledged financially or as having any rights. See, the owner of a business could think of himself or herself as the custodian of the business. And instead of just being their business being an asset for a narrow segment of people who are called shareholders, your business could be an asset to the whole population. You could do that. Why is that less appealing somehow? Why is that less appealing? Well, because of your culture, because of your values. Do you understand? This is what I'm telling you. This is not motivating for you to actually help people. That's not motivating for you. The capitalists will say that something like this will crash the market. It will destroy pensions. It will cause economic chaos. Look, you're holding the entire economy hostage to protect your casino. The real economy, the workers, the factories, the land, all of that is intact in a Waqf. Your financialized wealth is a phantom. No one needs to suffer because of that. The Waqf provides real security, direct funding for community needs. Then that's far more stable. That's a far more stable version of a pension than a number on a volatile stock market. You're using people's retirement money to gamble on stocks, and you call that stable? No. Waqf is a balanced, it's a sane, it's a civilized approach. Again, it's not state control, and it's not ruthless privatization, but common benefit through dedicated assets. Just a few. Again, we're not talking about a blanket policy. If you had any semblance, if you had any semblance of a decent, more responsible culture, then something like a Waqf is not even something that you would need to impose. It's not even something that you would need to have enforced by the government. It's something that a company owner himself or herself would just do voluntarily, because they themselves can do the math of how much of their net profits could actually help the population. And that would matter to them, rather than making people dependent on charitable donations by, Bill Gates or what have you, the philanthropy of individual billionaires who are just acting like feudal lords who are brushing crumbs off their table. Instead of that, you dedicate an ongoing revenue source to the population. You know that old saying, what's good for General Motors is good for America? Well, if General Motors was a Waqf, then that would actually be the case. Everyone would benefit when General Motors benefits. But okay, that's dreamland. I know that's dreamland. Apple's never going to do that. Microsoft never going to do that. United Health, Chevron, they're never going to do that, obviously. Of course they won't. Let's leave the S&P 500. Leave Wall Street. Leave Wall Street and go to your street, okay? Forget 25 massive companies. Let's just talk about 10. 10 companies in your city, in your own state. Not global behemoths, but local employers, big local employers. Successful family business, say, that became a regional powerhouse. There's a factory that's been there for 50 years, for example. There's a chain of grocery stores that everyone uses, for example. Some local tech firm that just hit it big, okay? Now imagine that the owner of that company, okay? He built this from the ground up, right? He employed, say, 200 people. It's worth $50 million. The net profit is around $5 million a year. That's a respectable figure. That's on the big end of a medium-sized enterprise. It's a significant player in the local economy. It's not a publicly traded firm, it's a family-owned firm. It's a privately owned business, okay? Now, say the owner of that company, he's 65. His kids don't want to go into that business, they want to become singers or something. But he's thinking about selling because he's getting old, he wants to retire. So there's, of course, a private equity firm that's circling. They're offering him a huge price for his company. He can retire in luxury, but you and I both know he's already a millionaire anyway. He's already a millionaire, maybe he's a billionaire by now, right? He's literally going to be living in luxury for the remainder of his life anyway. And so will his kids, the truth is. So will his kids, with or without the business. Whether he sells it or he doesn't sell it, him and his family are going to be fine. So why not turn that company into a Waqf? He doesn't sell. Instead, he decides to turn his company into a Waqf, a permanent endowment for the city, for the people. The company keeps running. You know, all 200 people keep their jobs. The managers keep managing. They keep producing their products or what have you. But the ownership is transferred to a trust. The company can never be sold again. Now it's an asset, a permanent asset for the community, a source of ongoing funds for community needs, for community services and so forth. Every year from now until the end of time, that $5 million in profit doesn't go to the owner's vacation home. It doesn't go to a private equity firm to strip it for its parts. It goes into a community fund. What could that $5 million a year do in perpetuity, year after year after year? Think about it. How many kids could go to university off of that? How many people could get help with their rent off of that? How many people could get their groceries, get help to buy their groceries, get help for daycare, get help for healthcare? It could fund after-school programs, you know, that the government is always cutting. It could provide seed money for dozens of new local startups every year. It could fix the local park. It could provide guaranteed basic income for every single elderly person in that city. Think about it. It could end homelessness in that city, not just manage it, end it. You know, you all complain in America, you all complain about your taxes. You complain about it all the time, but there's literally no reason, no good reason, why the United States has to tax their people at all. Except that you act like the extreme wealth of the super rich doesn't exist as a resource for your nation. You understand me? That's why I say it's extractive. Because look, they make all this money, the rich, they make all this money and it goes into their pockets. And once it's in their pockets, well, it becomes untouchable and sacred. Like say that city is $5 million short in education, in their education budget, for example. Well, that $5 million is produced every year. That money is there, you understand? You can't do anything with it though. So now the government has to raise taxes on the people who are already financially struggling. Well, this is absurd. It's absolutely absurd. There's no reason why it has to be this way. There are other ways to manage your economy. This is what I'm saying. But you don't think about it. You don't want to think about it. You don't imagine it. I mean, you could work out the details any way you like for something like this. Like say the state will buy that company, the example company we're talking about, instead of a private equity firm. The state buys it. They still give a big payoff to the owner. But then the company becomes a Waqf. And now that's $5 million that the state or the city does not have to tax people for to pay for services because the fund is there now, you see? There's no taxes in the UAE. There's no taxes in Qatar, for example. And that's not because they have smaller populations and it's not because they have oil, no. It's because they have a different culture. It's because they have a different system of values. It's because they have different priorities. They have a different belief system. So, okay, say you did that with one company in your city. You did that with one company in your state. It becomes a Waqf now. Now scale that up to 10 local companies. If you could scale that up to 10 local companies, you're looking at 20, 30, $50 million a year that could be flowing into permanent, some sort of a permanent community fund. Well, your whole city will become a different place. Your whole state will become a different place. It becomes resilient. It has its own independent source of funding. Independent source of funding for beautification, for helping the people, for innovation, and so on and so on and so on. It's no longer begging for state or federal grants. It's no longer begging for funding. It's no longer taxing you for that. They have their own economic engine for good. So why isn't this happening? Why aren't you doing this? Why didn't you ever even think of this? It's not illegal. the legal framework for a trust or an endowment that exists. It's not impractical, certainly. Like I say, the business keeps running. It's not unprofitable, just that the profit is being redirected. But you act like if it's going to the people, it's a loss. That's the reason why it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen because of the character of the culture that you have, the priorities of the culture that you have, the values of the culture that you have. You just don't even produce company owners in that country that would make a choice like that. You know, even while their marketing for their company is all about making your life better, the obvious truth that we all know is that they don't care even slightly about your life. Not even a little bit. The idea of dedicating your life's work to anonymous, perpetual good for the community in your society, in your culture that's not celebrated, it's seen as a waste. The Waqf model offers a legacy of sustainable provision for hundreds of thousands or even millions of people. It's like I say, it's a silent, endless river of benefit for people that the owner of a company who turns it into a Waqf will never even meet. But your culture doesn't respect that. Your culture respects the big payoff, the big payout. You're supposed to cash in. You're supposed to get yours. You're supposed to live a life of decadence. That's actually respected in your culture. That's the aspiration in your culture. So the obstacle is not economic. It isn't legal. It's spiritual. It's moral. It's a poverty of purpose. That's your culture. You have a culture that knows the price of everything, but the value of nothing. You understand me? And that tells you everything that you need to know about the sickness that you're in. The cage that you're in isn't made of laws. It isn't made of economic theories. It isn't made of regulations. The cage is in your minds. The cage is in your hearts. That's a fact. You're not trapped by the system. You are the system. The system reflects your values. The system reflects your culture. The system reflects your priorities and your aspirations. The system is a mirror of you. And the reflection in the mirror is never going to not look like you. You understand me? If you want the reflection to change, then you have to change what is being reflected. And until you change the human being that the system is reflecting, then all your revolutions and all your theories and all your grand plans for this or that social movement for change, this is all nothing but avoidance of the real work that you need to do. The revolution isn't going to start by a protest. It's not going to start by a rally or a march or breaking something. A real revolution in your society, in your culture, starts with imagination and will. A single, quiet, earth-shattering act of giving that shames the entire logic of your age. That's why I've said I don't think anything is going to change in America. I don't think anything is going to get any better in the US, because no one who even talks about the problems is actually even really serious about solving them. And I don't know if it's because they're just not actually serious people, or if it's because they literally are not equipped for seriousness. That's what I think it is. Because that's a very real thing in America. It's a very real thing in the West. Because like I've talked about many, many times on the channel, you have been deliberately stunted. You've been deliberately sabotaged, intellectually, psychologically, and in terms of your maturity. You simply don't have the requisite faculties for being serious people. So I don't see how you can change. See, when you hear someone crying, from the bottom of a well, say, crying out for help, okay, you get concerned, you want to help, you come running. But then you look over the side of that well and you see that there's a ladder in the well. There's a rope in the well. There's like escalating ledges that they can grab onto, they can climb up and so forth to get out of that well. So now you understand that the problem isn't what you thought it was. The problem isn't the well. The problem is the person, because you have options, but you don't want those options. So when someone's like that, there's nothing you can do for them. You can't do anything for someone like that. They will stay exactly as they are, because that's the choice that they've made. This is what you have to come to terms with in America. Your system is hideous, yes. Most of you are aware of that, painfully aware of that. But what you have to come to terms with is the fact that that hideous system is a reflection of you. It's not the other way around. Like I've said many times before, no one invaded you, from the outside. It's not like what you did to everyone else, with imperialism and colonization and so forth, you came to our countries and forced your hideous systems upon us. And they did not reflect us. And to one extent or another, you successfully mutated our societies to then become reflections of your system. But for us, we know this can't last. This won't last. And it's already fading away, alhamdulillah. Because who we are at the core has never changed. So your system is never going to be stronger than who we are as a people. But that's not your situation. That's not your situation. You are in the system that you built yourselves. You're in the system that you approved yourselves. You're in the system that you maintain yourselves. It reflects you. It reflects your culture. It reflects your values. It reflects your priorities and your aspirations. You have the mentality of scavengers and predators, hoarders, marauders and pirates. Yes, you do. That's a fact. The rich and the poor alike. Let's be honest. Let's be honest. The poor in your society are not more moral than the rich. They just have fewer options. You know, it's like the joke about an unattractive man who's less promiscuous than an attractive man. It's not that he doesn't want to be promiscuous. He just doesn't have the opportunity. Yes, you suffer more. The poor suffer more, definitely. You suffer more. But the truth is that most of you who are poor, but if you became rich, you would also make the poor suffer just as much as the rich are making you suffer today. And you know this is true because that's your culture. That's how you are, regardless of your class. Your class status just limits or expands your options for predation, but your character is as it is. You are an angry, aggressive, hostile, combative people. Everyone knows this about you. For all your talk about rationality and reason and logic, wallahi, you are the most emotional, the most volatile, the most erratic, the most easily triggered, the shortest tempered, the most impulse-driven people on earth. So no, personally, I don't expect you to change. I don't expect your system to change because I do not expect you to change as a people. Like I say, your system is an accurate reflection. So if you look in the mirror and you see a monster, you can't blame the mirror.
Hello, brothers and sisters. Welcome back to the channel. I'm hoping that you are doing great. Now, I hope we've heard everything that Mr. Shade Bolton have talked about. Honestly, I feel like he really talked about an important value that we all need to look into, right? Because he emphasizes that the American society suffers not because of democracy, but it is flawed in by principle. But because oligarchs, these are the billionaires, these are corporate dynasties and powerful lobbyists and financial elites, they have hijacked it. They transform democracy into an illusion where citizens vote, but the outcomes are predetermined by the wealthy. When these elites dominate the political class through campaign funding, lobbying, media control, and corporate America and corporate influence, governance becomes a business transaction. This results into what we call the moral bankruptcy. Our decisions are no longer guided by justice, compassion, or even collective welfare, but by profit, geopolitical power, and self-preservation. The system remains structurally intact, but morally dead at the same time, because it is about the profits. It is not about the morals. It's about the profit. It's about what am I going to gain at the end of it all? What is it here for me that I'm going to gain? Right? Now, Shade Bolton argues that oligarchs do not simply participate in society. They architect it in their own image. They create policies not to improve the population's well-being, but to serve corporation and global interests. For example, healthcare becomes a profit engine instead of a life-saving service. Housing becomes a financial instrument instead of a basic human right. Education becomes a debt machine rather than a tool for empowerment. The result is an engineered society where everything essential is expensive, inaccessible, or weaponized to maintain elite power. Oligarchs design the economy so that the masses struggle because struggling people are easy to manipulate, distract, and control. Right. So, this is where the moral bankruptcy becomes so much visible. The elites do not simply fail to help the population. They deliberately create conditions of instability. They create conditions of poverty. They create conditions of dependency. Why? Because the suffering of the masses increases the power of these few. That's where Shahid Bolton argues that American oligarchs prefer a broken society because a broken society makes people rely on the government for relief while remaining too exhausted to challenge the system. Make it make sense. They engineer inflation, economic crisis, social divisions or social tensions, cultural conflicts, political chaos, because these fractures prevent collective action. The suffering is not an accident, it is the blueprint of what they have always advocated for. It is This is what they have always wanted to be and how it should look. If you come to think and just look at all these dimensions and how it all happened. Also, Shed Bolton explains how American oligarchs use global power to sustain domestic control. The US government spends trillions on foreign wars, intelligence operation, military bases, not because it benefits the American people, but because it protects oligarch interest, access to resources, dominance of global markets, and the geopolitical leverage. Meanwhile, ordinary Americans struggle with homelessness, drugs, unemployment, medical debt, and collapsing infrastructure. The contradiction here is the greatest proof of moral bankruptcy. The ruling class prioritizes global power over national well being, proving the system serves elite rather than the people who fund it. At the same time, there's this critique that he also gives, and I like it because it is so much psychological. Oligarchs rely on social engineering to keep the masses distracted and divided. They use media, they use entertainment, they use political polarization and identity conflicts to redirect anger away from the elites and towards other ordinary citizens, immigrant, racial minorities, political opponents, or marginalized communities. That's how they do it. And instead of questioning corporate power, people fight each other. Instead of challenging exploitation, they debate culture wars. This is not accidental. Because Shahid Bolton makes it clearly because he says that creating a morally numbed and socially divided public is essential for elite control. A population focused on internal conflict never realizes that the true enemy is the oligarchic structure above them. And at the end of it all, I came to understand that Shahid Bolton's central message is that the system did not fail on their own. People failed the system. The American system could provide justice, could provide equality and prosperity at the same time, but it has been captured by individuals who lack moral principles. The moral bankruptcy at the top corrodes every institution, turning government into a corporations, citizens into consumers, and societies into pyramids of suffering. The problem is not democracy, nor capitalism. America is an idea. The problem is the oligarchs who run the system with greed instead of conscience. Until moral reforms reaches the highest level of power, structural reforms will remain impossible, and the system will continue serving only those who designed it to benefit themselves. Brothers and sisters, please let me know what you think and feel about this. As you know, I'm your host, and present agentic stories. But until then, I'm hoping to see you in my next video. Peace, love, and harmony. Salute.